Let me.
Chad, it's D1RT at Twitter.
No, I don't even remember what my Twitter handle is. It's not D1RT. It's like, I don't even remember. I don't know. Not worried about it.
All right.
All right, everybody. Thank you very much for attending today. We have quite a group for today's meeting, and we have some special people today giving us a talk. One of them is our very own Respeto, and then of course our very own Chad. Chad is I've known Chad for quite a bit. He is an incredible hacker, and I met him a long time ago during the transition to HackMiami, and he's done amazing, and he's done some great research work. Same thing with Respeto. Respeto is actually one of our backbones for our meetings, and I'm sure today they're gonna rock it out. And looking forward to see their presentation. So. A little bit of an update. We do have somebody that we know and appreciate in the hospital, and I hope that he gets better soon. You guys probably know him by his nick, Thurlin, his Sam. I'm not sure if you're here, Sam, but if you're seeing this for the hospital, we truly hope that you get better and you come back soon. We need you well and helping us like you always do. I hope the rest of you are keeping yourself safe. Many of you have heard what's going on, and supposedly there's a second wave or whatever. So just keep status quo and then try to keep yourself safe as much as you can. We will continue doing our meetings online. This doesn't seem to be relenting. I was actually thinking maybe do a one-off at the library, but the library is closed. So we can't really meet, but as soon as we can meet, we'll go back to in person. We may have to do something hybrid because we now get the Californian people here and the people from all over the country attending our meetings. So that's very exciting, and we'll keep or find a way to keep these meetings going so we can allow as many people as we can. So with that said, we'll be announcing soon. We had probably 2 or 3 meetings more for the rest of the year. One of them might be a capture the flag or something hands-on, and we'll be announcing it soon. For those who had not joined the Discord, just let me know, and I will post the invitation in the chat here. I heard some of you had been maybe affected by the layoffs. Please let us know. There's plenty of jobs out there, plenty. So just reach out to us, and I'm sure we can do something for you. So with that in mind, I'm gonna give the floor to Respeto and Chad, and take it away, guys.
Hey guys, so I'm Johnathan Respeto, and Chad right there.
And I'm Chad.
We're going to be talking to you about our, not our project, LiSa Sandbox. It's an open source project on GitHub. You can see it right there on the link. I put the link on every slide, so just make sure we get good coverage and reference the actual GitHub project. So if you guys want to fork it or clone it and use it, it's great. We have a great slide set to actually has an example of to install getting it set up. All right. All right. Who am I? Again, Johnathan. My Twitter handle is at JRespeto. I'm Respondo on HackMiami and on Discord. I'm not the Respondo bot. That's the actual bot that posts between our Slack and Discord. So don't at Respondo bot. It's not going to respond back to you. It's at Respondo. What do I do? I'm a security intelligence response team engineer. Chad's senior. I forgot to put the senior on there. And we do research on vulnerabilities on IoT devices and try to make countermeasures for DDoS attacks for our customer base. Are you guys seeing the slides properly?
They look really small.
They do? Yeah, just want to make sure.
Like they're taking up a quarter of your screen.
That better?
Could go even bigger. There you go.
There we go. All right. So what's LiSa? LiSa. One second. Did I go too far? All right. All right. What's LiSa? LiSa stands for Linux Sandbox. The software provides an automated Linux malware analysis on various CPU architectures, right? It utilizes QEMU, specialty kernel extensions, plugins to detonate, log, and generate reports for malware in a virtual disposable environment. Okay, you can again to just go right to GitHub, fork it or clone it, and if you really like it and do updates, contribute and post and pull requests are welcome to the project, I believe. Right. Chad, you want to talk about anything on this slide?
So basically one of the problems that we had as we were trying to capture and analyze these different types of malware are competing architectures. And the nature of the honeypots that we've produced results in us fetching malware samples from everything from x86 to ARMS to Spark. In some cases, if we have an x86 sample, that's good. In other cases, if we don't have an x86 sample, we might only have access to a MIPS or an ARM sample. So our quest was to find a means, like in Cuckoo, you have Windows support, and they've had Windows support, and then they recently added Linux support, which is great. But our problem was they did not have foreign architecture support. It's in the works apparently, but they didn't have it. So what LiSa provided to us was an opportunity for simulation, or not simulation, but emulation of these foreign architectures to actually get execution of malware, which is something that we were working on internally anyway. But the people behind the LiSa project took it one step further than even we were thinking at that point, and they wrote kernel extensions and the actual framework for deploying these things on the fly to be able to give you low-level system hooks for monitoring system calls and network traffic and all of that stuff. So that's pretty much the really awesome part of this project that shines, is that if you're collecting Linux malware and it's coming in this wide array of potential architectures, it doesn't care. It will take whatever sample you pass to it. It will identify which architecture it needs to be run under. It will create basically an architecture specific sandbox, boot up a virtual machine on the fly, detonate it, and then produce a final result. So that's what LiSa is and why it is awesome.
Again, it's multi-platform, supports multiple architectures, detonates malwares in an appropriate VM, so it automatically finds out that what that malware platform is, that it's written for, what architecture it's written for, and selects the appropriate VM, and has the low-level system hooks and network monitoring extensions. And all the reports are in JSON format, which it's pretty nice and easily to digest into other platforms. So one of our things is trying to get it to ingest it into either into our Elastic infrastructure, the actual report, and see what we could actually pull off of it. Some of you guys like Splunk. Splunk could easily ingest it as well into Splunk as well. All right. And it's easy to deploy. We'll show you exactly all the steps you need to just copy and paste and get this running on a virtual on a VSP. All right. What makes up LiSa? QEMU. It has radar 2 based statistic analysis. All right. Dynamic behavioral analysis and using system traps and kernel modules captures. Right. syscalls checks out for open files, process trees, and syscalls. It looks at network statistics and DNS and HTTP traffic. It also gives you prints out all of the telnet traffic or IRC communications on there. Endpoint analysis and right. So you could with blacklist. So it could tell you if you have a subscription to MaxMind GeoIP database, you could download. You could put in your API key into the system configuration. It'll download the MaxMind IP database for you and tell you, oh, these IPs are from China or Russia or Brazil or whatever country they come from, right? And it also has firehole blacklists, so that you could tell you, oh, these IPs are known C2s on the firehole blacklist or are spammer IP addresses. So it could tell you all of these IP statistics based off of a third-party list or a third-party service, right? It's scalable with Celery workers and RabbitMQ. So it based on the Docker configurations, it spins up 5 Docker images. Two of them being Celery workers, or you could scale it up to 10 Celery workers or a couple of VMs. Oh, and also you could scale, and it comes with 1 RabbitMQ server, an API server, and Nginx server, right? So it has everything's basically, you could call it through a REST API or through the front end. It's extendable. You could create your own modules, right, and add additional modules. Basically, everything's all of the modules and extensions can be written into with easily in Python, right? Not too easy. I guess easily, it depends on the scale of your knowledge set, but it's pretty good, right? So, Chad, you want to add into anything?
Yeah, so I already touched on the QEMU emulation part. Radar2, if you're not familiar with it, I personally have grown to love it. It is a free binary analysis. It was originally created for forensic purposes and for file carving, but it has grown and grown and grown. It's self-contained. It has no external dependencies really, which means you can get it running just about anywhere. You can have it running on your phone. You can have it running on a Raspberry Pi. It's architecture independent. It also can understand multiple architectures, so everything from x86 to MIPS to ARMS, and this is all free. You basically get a free ability to hook into GDB. It has its own debugger as well. It's super awesome. You should look into it. It makes digging through and analyzing binaries palatable. It's got a learning curve on it, but I think it's a great framework. It's a great starting point, and you can automate workflows through it. So that was a big selling point for us when we saw that Radar2 was used in here. What that tells us is that we can hook into Radar2 in multiple ways, in multiple architectures. So if we have additional analysis steps that we want to execute in let's say, that we have these extensible sub-analysis modules. What that tells us is we could create our sub-analysis module, and we could automate a Radar2 workflow within that module to accomplish things. And what I mean by a workflow or something, if, for example, we knew that at a particular offset in a binary, at the beginning of the text table and the first 1,200 bytes in, that this data for example, in a particular sample of this type, which we could identify based on a signature, was encrypted or obfuscated using a byte that can be found at this offset within memory of the binary. We could produce a module and do all of that with simple radr2 commands in Python, and then create a submodule that we can hook into this pipeline. So instead of needing to do advanced detonation or anything like that, we could go into that. Sorry, go back one more slide. I just got off track, but I dove into submodules more than I meant to there. The dynamic behavior analysis stuff using system tap is awesome. We started down this path and trying to find this because one of our initial concepts was hooking syscalls, because it's a reliable means for tracking particular things. So a syscall is like when your userland application goes up to the kernel and it wants to perform a network connection, it must talk to the kernel over a syscall to request it opening a socket to do that network communication. So even if you have obfuscated binaries at the lower level, if you just had a way to interact with the kernel and hook it and begin capturing those syscalls, you could start to really get a peek into what that binary is doing. So there's libraries like strace that do exactly this. The problem is that there's binaries that look for strace and the hooks that are present when an strace call is being used, and they'll prevent themselves from running. So the fact that this taps into the kernel outside of the execution space of the binary itself, but still captures the syscalls on that binary is super useful. And that's what gives you access to like opening of files, forking of a new thread is forked out of this thread and it's created over here, and then that thread writes these files. So the fact that you can track all of that and see a final report after you detonate a binary in the virtual container is super useful. It'll help you find everything from C2s to file writes to the system, file reads to the system, because fopen, fwrite, all that kind of stuff is all captured in syscalls. The additional static analysis or network analysis also aids in that. But it depends on how they communicate, right? So like if your malware is not doing a DNS query and it's not using HTTP and it's not communicating over Telnet or IRC, then your network statistics and analysis is going to be pretty bunk. The cool part is that it automatically creates a PCAP of everything that happened on the wire. So even if the network analysis and statistics that came out of their pre-canned analysis fails you, you can still look at the raw traffic and potentially make some more informed or intelligence extraction processes around that. The scaling and all the other stuff just makes it great because that means you can deploy it at scale. It's fine if you're running one sample through it. In our case, we're running, I don't know how many a day at this point. Currently, we're sitting at just around 10,000 samples that we've collected over the past few months. But if you were to be in a position, and as you scale out your other ports where you're consuming malware and bringing malware in either from external feeds or from honeypots or however you're doing it, scaling that up with the celery workers is preferable, because each one of these things has to spin up a deal and it takes 90 seconds. I think it takes 60 or 90 seconds by default is how long that thing runs. So if you have 10 workers, or if you have one worker, you're talking about 90 seconds of downtime for that to be. So if your backlog is building, being able to scale that out very quickly and easily is super important for your operation as it's going to scale up.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much it.
I think the default is I think the default's 20 seconds on the executions, but it does, if you want to make sure that they're getting a good execution, maybe adding it to a couple, about another 20 seconds. No, it's 20 on the configs on the default.
Okay.
Normally it's but if you want a better execution, probably adding like another 40, 50 seconds to it to let it. We've seen malware samples of Mirai just start hammering IP addresses and start port scanning and communicating out the C2s with it. So,
Well, and it's also possible that a smart adversary will expect you to have sane time limits. So, they could spin up their thing and then sleep for 2 minutes before they do anything because they're expecting you to detonate it. So being able to flexibly control those windows, and if you're finding that you're missing a lot of stuff at a smaller window, to be able to bump that up across your cluster and then also scale that cluster out to very quickly to deal with that additional overhead that you're now introducing to the system is super important.
yeah. To the next. All right, submodules. Submodules are extensible bit of LiSa that allow you to create or modify functions of the analysis process. Right, by default, analysis submodules included are the dynamic, the static, and the network analysis, file system operation analysis, and automatic detections of and API virus total API hooks. Right, these submodules are written in Python. They're easily modified, and additionally, it's easy to add custom submodules of your own. Right, when I was looking through it, I don't think that the virus total submodule is. I think it's commented out in the configs. You have to apply your virus total API key and uncommented in the configs, I believe, to get it to work. But but it's very useful to have. You could. Anything you want to add to this one, Chad? I think you spoke about it, submodules on the last one.
I was muted, sorry. But yeah, basically, I mean, this is where a lot of your customizability will come in to where, just like I talked about the RadR2 plugin, you could have simpler or more complex plugins at this point when you're doing your analysis to potentially, like, let's say one of the features that this does not have, but may be beneficial, would be to get an actual memory snapshot of the QEMU instance at a certain trigger or something along those lines within the binary.
Yeah, and take do a volatility scan on it, or
right. So this is where you could implement that kind of feature, because you would have a hook into the analysis process that tells you when the virtual machine is up and running and the binary is detonated. So you could say, hey, after detonation, wait so many seconds and do a volatility snapshot, and I want to be able to see what's running in memory of this thing. But likewise, you could do the same thing with, RadR2. If you wanted to essentially detonate the thing, wait X number of seconds, or wait until a case, and then connect into the PID that was returned as part of that process, hook your debugger, and then start doing some kind of memory analysis at that point once this binary is unpacked. Cases like this, you may want to, like a submodule here that would be useful, would be identifying if it's UPX packed. And if it is UPX packed, unpack it and get the hashes before you detonate it, because that may be more relevant to what you're seeing. Like there's a string module that is in here, for example, that takes whatever binary you've submitted into the system and it runs strings over it, and then it takes the output of strings and actually stores it in the resulting report, so you can easily get a digest of all the strings that were in this binary. But that's going to be basically useless in a packed binary. So having access to this submodule to modify it to either UPX unpack it, or being able to write an additional submodule that will UPX unpack it before detonation occurs, or before that string module runs, are both kinds of like the example of the customizability and feature sets that you can either modify or add as you go forward, depending on what you need. And it's really what's going to make it's going to take you from off the shelf, something that works kind of well, to something that you can really hone and twist the knobs and make it work exactly how you need it to work for whatever your use case is.
I think you want to talk about this one.
Yeah, I mean, this is I think I've touched on this a few times already, that basically the rad R2 being under the hood and exposing R2 pipe, which is the Python bindings for rad R2 in your sub-analysis modules, is super handy. And what makes it handy is you can sit down at a machine, have rad R2 installed. You can open that binary on your machine without it being in a debugging mode. So you're not worrying about compromising yourself. Come through places where you see, oh, okay, you know, I'm in this binary, I'm doing analysis, and I figured out that if I jump here, okay, and then I grab the next 1024 bytes, and I'm actually looking for this byte sequence within that 1024 bytes at this offset. And once you have that human workflow, like, you know what commands you need to run and in what order you need to run them, you can literally just take that exact workflow and move it into an R2 pipe Python script and turn it into an automated script, by literally just taking your rad R2 history and moving it over. And wrapping it in R2 pipe command calls and then processing that output. So I'm just a fan of rad R2. I think it's underappreciated, and to see it included in a project that we can leverage, and knowing what we can do as far as automation with it and how powerful it is just exciting for me. So I'm just trying to get everybody hyped on radar.
We got to do a presentation on Rad R2 later on.
Yeah.
Every time I shut the door and my daughter comes in here, I go on mute and I go stand up over there and I thought I locked the door like twice and she just walks right in. I'm like, what the heck? Is she like?
She's a natural. She's a natural.
Yeah, she's a natural hacker right there, just breaking into my room.
Oh, somebody asked a question, but I'm on my phone because my laptop is I don't want to talk about it. But I can't see what that message is on my phone. So I'll pop up while I was talking.
Do you want now or you want to take it at the end?
I mean, yeah, we can take them at the end. That's fine.
Yeah.
At the end?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The questions at the end.
Okay.
It's only one more slide, actually. Why are we using it? Gotta change that to why are we using it over in HackMiami. The Linux malware ecosystem is over the past few years has been dominated by cyber criminals together with IoT. This means that Linux malware is captured by our honeypots come in many architectures, while some other sandbox detonate system support and detonation system support. These architectures like Windows, Cuckoo Sandbox, basically mostly Windows. There's other sandboxes out there that are mostly Windows. This one's been the one that we've liked the most. That's been mostly Linux based, and most of the IoT devices are just Linux based systems. They're not Windows. They're not Windows. What is that small Windows version? CE or some other.
They've started releasing ARM versions now because they had to, because of their Surface Pro whatever's started running ARM architecture. So they had to actually bite the bullet and start producing Windows binaries and libraries in ARM.
Well, we might start to do that. We might have to start spinning up a Cuckoo Sandbox for just those ARM devices too. But hopefully that's why Cuckoo's spinning up ARM.
I will say that luckily, in the IoT space, nobody seems to be running ARM Windows-based IoT devices yet. So at least we got that. That gives us a fighting chance for a little bit.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, so to give you guys an idea as to what we're working towards and what we've been building over the past, I mean, it's been a pipe dream for a while. It's finally starting to come together after a lot of futzing around and figuring out what we want to build. But the workflow that we've constructed internally, it's a chicken or egg problem where we need to collect malware so we can build a proper consumption and identification pipeline. And part of that consumption and identification pipeline is obviously controlled detonation in a controlled environment at automated fashion, where we can potentially include customization as we further our research into different samples, into different functionality. And from an organization, we use this intelligence to protect our customers. So, what we want to do is proactively start identifying when the bad guys are compromising these IoT devices, get samples of the malware that they're downloading to those devices and executing, so that we can in turn identify what are the functionalities and features of this malware, but more importantly, where is it connecting to, and how is it connecting, where is it connecting, and what language does it speak. So if it's plain text, great. If it's binary protocol, great, we can reverse that. But our primary goal is being connected into their control infrastructure and essentially spying on them as they try to leverage these attacks. And then, if we have our foot in that door and we can have a visibility into what they're attacking, then we can identify if that what is our customer and begin proactively mitigating those attacks as they start to direct traffic at our customers. So for this pipeline, LiSa is that controlled and customizable detonation component. So we've been tackling it in pieces. The first piece obviously is, if you don't have the malware to detonate, then you can't really test your detonation theories or plans or customization. Yep. So starting at the honeypots, we got that sorted out, or at least partially sorted out. And then the next painful problem became, well, crap, this isn't just x86. This is what we need. We need x86 because we can emulate that and do all kinds of easy stuff with x86 because it's been around forever. But now that we're starting to see that they're hitting light bulbs and routers, now we have to get into MIPS and ARM. And this is kind of a frontier that is coming up and breaking out now, because it didn't used to have to be a problem. There was enough low-hanging x86 fruit, but now the lowest hanging, most vulnerable fruit is your grandma's modem. So
Or
this was
the
reality
new refrigerator, or that new TV, or that new IoT TV.
I mean, just to put it into context, like how weird of a problem this is, I think 2 years ago, one of our teammates, Larry Cash Dollar, was doing research into a binary. It may have been last year, but we were looking into a binary. It came with, at first, it came with 23 different exploit payloads, and then we found the next iteration of it in our honeypots, and it came with 36, and the next iteration came with 48, and the next iteration came with like 89. So, these actors they know what they're doing. They're identifying this low-hanging fruit. But as we started to dig into those different exploits and try to identify what exactly they were targeting, one of them was a crock pot. So somewhere in the world, there was somebody's crock pot that they're, slow cooking, a beef stew in, and it's also attacking a bank. So this is the reality that we live in now.
Yeah.
And trying to build a pipeline that can deal with that kind of diversity in what you might see land in your pot is a challenge.
Who needs an internet connected crock pot for real?
Yeah, it's so you can monitor your crock pot over your phone and adjust the temperature. Uh-oh, my beef stew.
I'm gonna be an hour late. I guess I better lower this to the low setting instead of the medium.
That's right. I need to set it to warm. It's done crocking and potting now.
All right. Like I said, here's our lab setup. Not our lab setup, but an actual lab setup that you could set up within about 20 minutes. There's two sections. One is just getting the Linode setup going. I tried this on DigitalOcean on the $5 boxes. It didn't work. The Linode $5 boxes did work. So I just wanted to make sure I got the right one for that you guys could actually run and execute and go through the entire workflow, right? And the very important part is that this listens on localhost at the end. So what you need to do is you have to do this SSH connect to your Linode, right, on 4242, just so that you can connect to the Linode. All right. Let me see if I can get my screen going. Share my other screen. Share terminal. There's no way to just change sharing.
Gotta love WebEx.
There we go. Make this bigger. And while I'm running commands, we'll get basically I'm going to. I already shared out the slides. Everyone has access to them, so we could go. Let me just get out of full screen mode. Oh. So you're going to run through these steps. If it doesn't work, this is actually going to work because I disabled the firewall. These were additional troubleshooting steps if you had problems, but I integrated them into the first set of slides in this slide. All right. What you're going to want to do is reboot. Okay. And then here's some reference materials for LiSa. And my daughter's yelling at me through the door, which is really fun, you know. So it's breaking my concentration while I'm talking. 1 sec. All right. Stop sharing. Where's the escape? There we go. Now I could. So I'm still sharing. Great. So I'll go here. Copy that. And just paste all of that in. And while this is running, we could take questions. All right. Rod, you want to read off some questions on here?
Yeah. Would there be cases where malware tries to detect it's on a VM and ends up hiding all these tools?
Yes. Normally there is a, but malware does try to detect if it's on a VM and probably not execute if it's on a VM. It could check to see if it's if there's any Docker drivers or VM drivers, and say, hey, this is a VM. I'm not going to detonate on this or on this type of sandbox or try to actually run.
There's also there's architecture specific flags and things that they can do. So if you are on an ARM device, for example, there are things that you can place in registers and then execute particular commands that will cause those registers to change in particular ways. And these are part of the actual device spec, but depending on how the emulation works, the responses that are loaded into those registers can kind of leak if it's a real device or if it's emulated, or if it's running in a VM, etc. So there are checks. A lot of the VM detect stuff is pretty rudimentary. And on top of that, the authors, because this isn't just, hey, we're trying to emulate ARM, it's also a case of, hey, we're trying to trick malware. There's actually, I believe in one of the modules that we have here that comes with LiSa is a VM detect. So basically an anti-VM, anti-VMer, to where it identifies some of those edge cases where it knows that a VM detect is going to be attempted, and it patches around them or modifies functionality to trick the detection process. Once again, another beauty of the submodules. You may be able to identify those things during analysis and proactively patch against them. And I mean, proactively patch against them in the sense that like the underpinnings that are RAD-R2 do have the ability to do writing directly into a binary. So for example, if you know that they're not stripping this binary and that they have a function called, you know, exit VM or something, you could go into RAD-R2, run the analysis, find the function, figure out the length of the function, and then trace back to every place that it's called, and then NOP that function call to bypass that function. And you could do that automatically if you were to write a smart enough script. So this is one of those cases where, yes, it's possible, but yes, I can already think of ways to defeat it in an automated fashion. But it's one of those things where you don't know what they're going to do until they do it. And a lot of the samples and a lot of the actors that we see show up in our honeypots, they are not the highest. Like you're not going to come in here and find, you know, a nation state that is targeting another nation state with a highly targeted attack, has accidentally dropped some really crazy malware into your, you know, your piece of crap SSH honeypot. Like it's not going to happen. So the level of your adversary isn't that high in a lot of these cases, and the VM detects will be pretty simple to defeat in a lot of cases. Typically what you see are timing checks, and those are usually more geared towards attempting to identify when a debugger is present versus attempting to identify when you're in a sandbox.
Here's a good question. Are there any IoT devices on the market that are the least vulnerable? What architecture or models seen by you guys are the most hardened towards against a average malware payload?
You know, I can't tell you what brand you should pick. I can only tell you what brands you should probably avoid. It's a lot easier, and it's in part due to our myopic view of the problem, right? So we're not going out and looking at all of these IoT devices that are rock solid and never have a problem. We're looking at a subset of infections that are targeting known vulnerable devices, and then we can start to find patterns across them. So like anything from ZTE, if you have one in your house, just fucking unplug it and throw it in the trash can, or take it into your lab and start picking it apart, because there's probably problems with it. We've seen ZTE be a big problem. There's another one from China that's basically, if it's from China, it's bad. It's a pretty general rule. Like DVRs, we've seen repeated problems with DVRs, but it's not just Chinese branding anymore. You know, we're finding stuff where it's D-Link and it's Zixel, and you know, some brands that have a reputation for being security oriented and being pretty decent, they also have problems. So I can't tell you what device you should get. I can say that I like Ubiquiti's personally. They seem to be pretty good. They're featureful. They're reasonably priced. I feel like the features you get out of them for the price are decent, and they've had their share of problems too. So you just kind of got to roll the dice. I don't know. I don't buy particularly cutting edge brand new network gear. A lot of the stuff that I'll buy will be a little bit older, and you can basically just take whatever manufacturer you're looking at and do a Google search for, Netgear CVE, D-Link CVE, Linksys CVE, and start to see, do they have a repeated history of CVEs. You can even go so far as to Google the model number of the device that you're looking at to see if there are known exploits that potentially impact it. But that's about as good as you can do as a consumer.
Great. Here's another question. Have you worked on any industrial IoT devices with systems running variants like VxWorks or GE?
I'll say that we haven't dove into those a lot. I can tell you that in our research while looking into some of this stuff, we have found industrial systems inadvertently exposed and probably compromised. But most of those cases there's like one that's called like Rockwell Automation, and they basically take these old systems and they provide this interface, like a serial interface that they can hook into this thing and then plug an Ethernet cable into it, and then you can get to that thing over the internet. So they're taking stuff that wasn't internet connected and making it internet connected. And we've seen a good amount of that, to where, you start searching for something and you're like, well, this is kind of weird. This banner looks a little bit different. It's not widespread. And then you find, oh, this is some Rockwell Automation connector. So you're not really sure what's on the other side of it, and you're not going to figure out what's on the other side of it until you break laws. But looking at it and knowing that it is either exhibiting vulnerable characteristics, or the real nightmare is when we actually observe it participating in an attack that lets us know that this thing's compromised, because there's no way that this, whatever industrial machine behind this Rockwell Automation endpoint here, should be sending a send flood, but it is. So, there's cases like that as well.
Here's another one. If you have heard of a coffee machine getting ransomware.
I haven't heard about that, but I totally believe it. There was a guy a couple years ago that was running what's called BrickerBot, and basically he was getting sick of all of the IoT kids running around, taking over everybody's this or that. So he took it upon himself to take the same exact exploits that they were using. And then once he got into, and I say exploits very loosely because a majority of that attack was just weak SSH credentials that were not changed on the devices, either because they couldn't be or because of owners didn't know they should change them or what, but they had really bad credentials. So what this guy was doing was going around the internet and SSHing into these things in an automated form. And then once he connected into the device, he told him to delete every file in the Etsy thing and try and flash the flash memory and basically destroy this device as much as possible. And then he would tell it to reboot, under the hope that the damage that he had done either into the flash memory, the persistent configuration settings that he tried to delete and overwrite and modify and mess up, or the system files being removed from some of the mounted storage that might be writable, would cause that device to not be functional. So that was his entire goal. So to hear that somebody is trashing or ransomwaring a coffee pot sounds totally reasonable. They probably didn't mean to, but they did.
Here's another question.
I'm sorry, they meant to, but they didn't know they were doing it to a coffee pot. I'll put it that way. That coffee pot probably had some underlying flaw, and they were targeting other devices. But I mean, I'd be pretty pissed off if I went to get coffee and it told me to pay Bitcoin.
Yeah, me too. I need my coffee in the morning.
It
In the
cost me
beginning-
$2,000 to make a cup of coffee? Are you kidding me?
In the beginning, as it's spinning up, you might see some errors that it's not working. It's because, or that the worker can't connect. That's because the RabbitMQ server didn't finish spinning up. So the Celery worker actually starts connecting again. See, it can't connect here because the RabbitMQ is still getting configured down here, right? So it gets configured, and then it actually starts working. It gets connected again. All right. So right now we're up. The Lin node LiSa is actually running on this Lin node. All right. So right now what we have to do is make sure we get an SSH connection to it, or connect to it again. All right. And I'm going to just grab that and just change out my, actually just double check. Yeah. So what I did here was on this Docker Compose, I did a -d and then I connected to the log with a -follow, with a -- follow, right? So basically what that means, I could just go into this session, right? Control C. It's still running. Right? They're still up and running. Okay, so there's no problem there. I could exit it, no problem. Grab that IP address, go to this other window here. That /h, toss in the IP, or what's going on here? Whatever. You don't need the -h. All right, and then just go to localhost 4242. Right. Right here. And you're connected. All right. What's good about What's good about this? This isn't running on your laptop anymore. Now you could just submit a file. All right. Select the file. We're gonna go ahead and I cloned this already on my laptop, so I have the test. There's test files, right? So we could run a test and just make sure that it's uploaded. So one of the issues that I had when setting up the lab is that we needed to update the Celery from version, just basically tick the Celery version up one, because there was like a sub dependency that was erroring out, and that needed the .1 version of Celery, the 4.3.1 version of Celery, right? And you actually have to do chmod 777 the storage directory, or else you can't upload from the web interface to have the analysis run. One of the things is that how this is set up is that all of the VMs are sharing a volume on the actual main system. So you can't spin up 10 servers on Linode and scale it out. But it is doable. You can scale it out if you set up volumes on Linode and then have it share the same volume on all the Linodes. So if you do need to scale them out or turn off Linode VMs and turn them back on if you don't want to pay the bill for having like 10 machines going. It's just a little bit more Ansible automation that you have to do. and then just map the store so that they all share the same storage directory. But it is doable to share the same storage directories, all right, so that they could all write. And then after a couple of minutes or 25, 30 seconds, you should see a result, right? And right here, you click on the results, and it starts displaying all of the JSON files, right? So you have the report, which is basically these reports, right? You have some network analysis reports, some dynamic analysis reports that it generates, the process trees, all of the system calls, right? This is on a test binary. Let's see if we could find, I think I have a binary available. Let's see. That would be in here. Take this out. Oh, those are PDFs, PDFs, PDFs. Let me see something real quick. Just for one moment, I'm going to just stop sharing. So, Chad, how's been your day? Let's see.
Do we have any more questions, Rod?
Yes. Are you seeing IoT devices trying to own devices on your land? Is there even a market for moving sideways in a home environment?
I mean, we've seen malware do scanning, but they usually go out to the internet. We've seen with some of the UP and proxy research, we did find that the bad guys were injecting NAT injections into the home devices that were allowing them to pivot around the firewall and into the LAN and start targeting stuff inside the network. They were trying to expose SMB services, we think for like Eternal Blue and stuff. But I can't say we've really seen yet any malware campaigns that have gotten caught in our stuff or anything that we've dug into that once it gets a foothold on the router or whatever it's in, that it starts scanning, you know, its local network for lateral movement stuff. I'm sure we will. It's only a matter of time until we do, but we haven't yet.
Somebody made a comment on PLC SLC 500. Know about it or heard of it?
I'm unfamiliar with that. Is that an
Looks like-
industrial system or something?
Yeah, something like that. Many of the HMIs they use are still running all Windows version backend, either Windows XP, and even Win CE. Oh, he's saying that I guess it's a Rockwell Automation.
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly what devices we were looking at when we came across the Rockwell Automation stuff. That was definitely in like, I mean, I still see it when we do scans and we start looking at stuff. Like we still see Rockwell Automation occasionally pop up. I'd be actually curious if you went on Shodan right now and searched Rockwell, what you would find. I bet you'll find some devices sitting on the internet that are handing back a Rockwell Automation banner. But yeah, Alan Bradley, that's another one. Yep, have definitely seen both of those. But I don't know if we ever attempted to actually identify what it was. partially because the banner itself only said Rockwell Automation, if I recall. And I had never heard of Rockwell Automation or Alan Bradley. And as part of trying to track down some of the stuff that is infected and impacted by some of these different campaigns and exploits, digging into the names and going down the Google rabbit hole of trying to figure out, okay, here's the model number for this thing, who makes it, what is it, would result in us learning about Rockwell Automation and Alan Bradley, and then figuring out what we were looking at and how terrifying it is. Because you don't know, is it a nuclear reactor? Is it a city's, water maintenance systems?
Right.
Is it some industrial furnace for a school? You don't know.
Right. Respeto, you want to continue or?
Yeah, I was just putting in some other malwares in there to test. So this was another one. It actually tried to, what it did was just get a DHCP IP address. This one didn't do much analysis, but as you could see, you can download the program output. All right, and we could open that up. Basically, a lot of these don't run a lot. If you get a malware, sometimes it might just be bunk, it not going to run, or nothing's going to happen to it. If you go ahead and if you're testing a lot of malwares, like let's see, this one failed, right? And it gives you a reason why. It's not the right architecture. It was a bin file, so it didn't execute. So you'll see stuff like that. All right, there's when you get the PCAPs, if you see one that actually has a PCAP, so this one didn't have any, only had DHCP requests, right? So you could actually see that in the PCAP. If I get the PCAP open here and share the screen. Let's see.
The other thing too is if we have the results.json digest that comes out of it, I could go in there and see if that did some syscalls and try and show how that works.
Yeah, I'm trying to get another PCAP file that actually had some better. Yeah.
So in the system that we're building for the Akamai intelligence platform stuff, like one of the example use cases that we're working towards and that we'll be able to do in the long run is going from these, if we detonate a piece of malware and that piece of malware outputs to the screen, loaded whatever, trying to look like, we've seen them say like TUNTAP 0 up and stuff like that, like generic looking output that's, the actors have in there so they know that it's successfully executed when they're testing it and all that good stuff. But to an outside observer, it doesn't really look like much. Well, all of that stuff goes through a syscall. So in a completed system, what we'll be able to do is say, okay, this particular malware sample, when we detonate it, it's going to output this message to the screen. So now we can go backwards and look through all of our results JSONs and look for cases where the syscall that outputs stuff to the screen is called, and the payload that was passed and output to the screen is this string. That will allow us to identify hashes. We could also do like SS deep searching to find related or very similar samples. But from those hashes now we can identify a cluster of samples and then go backwards all the way until we get to honeypots or SSH logs or whatever to figure out exactly where that sample came from. And it will give us a high level overview of a campaign. We can say, this campaign, was clearly using these exploits. It was using these command injections. We know that these command injections affect this modem or this router or this device using this CVE. And The functionality of that binary is DDoS capabilities. It can do this kind of attack and that kind of attack and this kind of attack, and the attack traffic looks like this. These are the binaries that were a result of that campaign, and those binaries communicated with these 3 or 4 different C2s, and now these 3 or 4 different C2s have issued 10,000 commands, and 13 of which have attacked this customer of ours. So having that full pipeline of being able to piece that together. So when a customer says, hey, we got hit out of the blue yesterday with this huge attack, what can you tell us about it? Well, we can tell you that the people that built that botnet started 6 months ago, and it's been growing steadily, and they're targeting these things, and they hit you with this kind of attack, but we were able to mitigate it because we knew it was coming, and we already have signatures pre-written for the mitigation specialist to use. So just to put things into perspective as to how these different little pieces of information and these different little pieces that leak out of every layer of this system enable an overall larger intelligence operation.
Yeah. So on this right now, on this PCAP that we're seeing right now, so the analysis was kicked off, right? And then we got the analysis actually showed a couple of alerts in the analysis that it was sending out that the binary was sending out a bunch of SINs on this particular malware, right? We looked into it on the network analysis, and it showed a connection out to 3-way handshake connections, a couple of them, right? That actually completed. And then we actually noticed that on these signatures here, we have some particular handshakes that were done, right? So we could know that we could put one and one together and say, oh, okay, here's a communication out to C2s, right? And we're seeing handshakes come back. So then that the system is actually looking for telnet connections out on the internet. So this binary just turned on, started scanning the internet and connecting out to C2s and waiting for commands to come back, right? I believe on a couple of these, like if there was actually, here, you can see that this one actually got an acknowledgement back, right? And here's some telnet data from that connection. You can see that it's probably was trying to do some connections. There's no telnet data on that one. I actually saw one that was saying, oh, okay, here's trying to log in. Right. So this is some DOCSIS gateway. So that's some cable modem out on the internet, and then the malware is trying to probably do an actual connection to it. It says.
So this one, it's probably using like TR069 or whatever to abuse stuff. But the other places where this kind of intelligence is beneficial is with Mirai very early on, because of how the person that wrote the original source code and then released it to the public implemented their SIN scanning for telnet machines. Basically, every Mirai node acts as a tiny brute forcer. So while your machine's infected with Mirai, it's not only participating in attacks, it's also constantly scanning the internet in an endless loop. It's attempting to connect to everything on 23, 23, 23. I think those are the 2 primary ports. And then once it successfully gets a connection back from a device, it then runs through a list of credentials, and it attempts to log in and sees if it successfully logged in. And if it hasn't, it disconnects and reconnects and does another login attempt until it successfully connects. Yep, exactly.
Yes.
I love chicken nuggets. And then once it identifies that, hey, I have successfully logged in, it doesn't go through the process of infecting that machine. It reports that machine up to a higher level piece of infrastructure. That piece of infrastructure takes the confirmed, if I connect to this machine on this port with this username and this password, I'll be able to connect in and infect this thing. And then another machine comes back later, logs in with those credentials without brute forcing at all, and then infects that machine.
Yeah,
What's interesting is because of how it sets up the handshake as part of its scanning, there is a pattern with the device it's connecting into and some of the characteristics of that initial SYN packet. So you can sit back and look at SYN traffic as it's hitting your machines sitting on the internet, and you can identify other machines that are sitting on the internet that are actively infected with Mirai. In some cases, that's super beneficial. And having this level of data collection from your sandbox, not just saying, hey, it talked to this DNS and it did this, but having the actual raw PCAPs and being able to analyze the raw packet data that came out of this malware can lead to those kinds of discoveries. So that's yet another reason why LiSa is awesome, because it automatically captures all this stuff for you.
At some point, I did see that it was also, it pivoted and started to scan the internal network as well for
Oh,
devices.
Well, there
Yeah.
you go. That answers your question. I hadn't
So-
seen that yet.
Yeah, because here we're seeing, look, it's trying to scan the internal network, the 10.2 network as well. 10.2.15, 10.2.2.2. Oh, maybe that's just the ICMP replies back. Yeah, it's not really scanning the internal network. Oh, it's just junk. There's other things here. It goes out. See, as you can see, this PCAP goes on for a while. It's 6,000 lines long, and you
That
can just
might
say,
also just be poor programming.
yeah.
It could just be a bug in their scanning code.
Oh,
We
here's
know
the
that
heartbeat back. All right, so there's a heartbeat for Mirai C2.
Yeah.
So it was trying to communicate out. So this is a very interesting PCAP to go through when you're as soon as you get your analysis set up, right? Actually, I did see something that was interesting. Or was something else, actually. Or was that?
But like in our use case for this, we would look at not just that it's doing the scanning and whatever, that successful communication to and from the C2 is handy to know. It's handy to know that this sample communicated to this IP on this port, and great. But in the case of Mirai, and in the case of other variants of malware, actually, it uses a binary protocol, and that binary protocol requires a certain set of heartbeats and handshakes be delivered in a certain order with a certain timing. Additionally, they pass in a string as part of that handshake. So you'll see the binaries detonated on the system, and they'll call it DVR helper, but then they'll pass a string that's pwned, and the C2 itself could be identifying that string in the heartbeat and either responding or not responding based on that string being present. So while a generic communications response tells you a lot about where it talked to, looking for that heartbeat or those standardized types of communication that you can expect. If this thing is living on port 23, the C2, but then it's also scanning the entire internet for port 23, how do you find the C2 looking at a list of IPs that all say port 23? Well, you have to go one step further, right? You have to look at the communication, the conversation that happened between those devices.
Mm-hmm.
And because it's not sending textual data, you have to do it at a hex level. Like you want to look at the actual bytes of the communications. And with Mirai, you see null bytes are the opening handshake. You see a couple null bytes, a handshake payload. You see a time window. You see null bytes returned. You see null bytes returned. You see null bytes returned. So looking for those kinds of patterns in the resulting PCAP will be how, for example, we will identify C2s going forward in an automated fashion. So just like we have these sub-analysis modules, we will write modules that say, okay, the analysis is run Now it's time for us to analyze this PCAP. Like, they did a good job of telling us the DNS and the telnet and the IRC. That's great. But we want to identify a C2 and potentially a family. So we may run through that PCAP data and say, hey, did we see any communications where it had these bytes in this order? And if we did, that tells us A, we found a C2, and B, what type of C2 have we found? And then we can report that back into the final report, which we can then use to track in an automated fashion the C2s that are running these botnets. So yeah, I probably just told you a little bit too much about how the sausage is made, to be honest, but there you go.
I think there's another question here. Are wearables and EVs becoming part of the IoT malware campaigns? Any new attack vectors that you've seen, for example, that you're curious about?
I will say, if there is a device out there, if it's not part of the attack campaign now, it probably will be. So while I cannot point to a positive case where I can say, yes, this was a wearable or this was an EV and it was attacked, and this is a game changer, I would not be surprised to find out that there has been one, even if I'm not aware of it. And when it does happen, I won't consider it a game changer at all. It'll just be more of the same exact thing. It's just getting its tentacles into a newly exposed pool of the same old crap that we've seen everywhere else.
So here's a question for you guys from me. Do you think that 5G is a game changer?
You know, I
I don't know. I don't
suppose
think so.
I suppose it could be. I mean, you got to think about it like this. When it comes to the DDoS trends that we've observed over the years, I remember being at DEF CON probably 6 or 7 years ago, and there was a talk that I couldn't get into, which is, at DEF CON 6 or 7 years ago. DEF CON now, you can't get into any talk. But 6 or 7 years ago, not being able to get into a talk was pretty impressive. And that talk was from Matthew Prince of Cloudflare, talking about how they successfully mitigated a 325 gigabit per second attack. Okay, and that was like earth-shatteringly large. It was so large at the time that there were a lot of people saying that their numbers were wrong and their metrics were wrong or whatever. So nowadays, we last year mitigated a 1.4 terabit per second attack. For those keeping track at home, that's about 4 times larger than what the biggest attack was that 7 years ago, like earth-shatteringly large 7 years ago. And this is 5 times larger. Google put out an announcement, an article about DDoS a couple days ago, and they never publicly disclosed it until now, but they claim that all the way back, I think in 2017, so a few years ago, they had to mitigate a 2.4 terabit per second attack. So this isn't a coincidence that the attacks get larger as the bandwidth gets more prevalent. And I think that in this regard is a game changer, because the faster I can do anything, the faster I can do anything, right? So the faster I can stream that 4K, that's the faster that I can potentially push that amount of attack data out. If I have a symmetrical 1 gig line coming up and down, in theory, a single user could generate a gig per, and now you're compromising.
Oh, could you
1,000 of
just
those,
imagine? It's
10,000 of
not just a
those?
gig per. You're generating a gig of, but you could also be generating a gig of reflection that's using amplifiers, right?
Well, that's what I'm saying. You could be. I mean,
And
I feel like that is a game changer in that regard. We saw during the Mariah attacks, everybody freaked out in 2016, because of a 650 gig attack, and it was the biggest recorded, blah blah blah, and it shook everybody up. And the reality is that those devices that were participating in that attack, we were able to get our hands on them, and they had a 100 meg modem. Like, they couldn't push more than 100 megs if they wanted to. Had those same devices had a gigabit interface, how much traffic could they push? And what we're seeing now is we're seeing, faster chips getting cheaper and smaller, being placed in more of this IoT stuff, and the overall specs are going up. It won't be long until these devices have a cheap gigabit interface on them. It won't be long until a gigabit interface is connected to potentially a multi-gigabit link of a consumer device, and the amount of damage that a pull of those things could do could be, considerable.
Also, look at the previous research of WireX using smartphones as DDoS devices as well.
Yeah. I mean, and that's a perfect case. If your smartphone can push traffic, we've seen, there are campaigns where we've seen these devices get owned. In the WireX case, they were getting compromised, but not like maliciously. It's not like they had some underlying flaw. It was just people installing free flashlight apps that happen to also have DDoS capabilities. So if those devices, I don't remember how many we found. I want to say
it's like
40
over
to 70,000.
500 applications were removed from the Google Play Store for that, right?
Yeah, I think it may have been more than that. They found a ton of applications because once we reported it to Google, then Google went through and started identifying. They found a trend, and then they could pivot through the Play Store. So we had, I think, 20 or 30 that we knew about, and I think that they told us they identified hundreds or thousands. And they never gave us a straight number about how many devices those were installed on. But, in the future, when every phone has 5G and you run into a problem like that, that's just going to enable that phone to push more traffic and, potentially cause more damage.
Right. You also have wearables that have now cell phone connection that you wear while you're sleeping or you're doing exercise. So
All right.
I got one more question for you guys, since you guys worked on the internet company. Do you think the internet will be broken up,
like
yeah.
antitrust stuff?
No. I was told once that in an unclassified meeting I had somewhere that they were expecting at any time a catastrophic attack, that it would be so bad that the government would say enough is enough. We're not going to allow you anymore to access our military or government, or we're just going to break up where the utilities connect. And we just leave this like, cable TV. That hasn't happened yet, but I've been told that they are preparing for that. What is your opinion?
I mean, you're talking about splitting of civilian and industrial and governmental
like
networks?
they break it up, like you pinging, for example, a university or a hospital in China or Russia is never going to happen again. We're just going to break up.
I don't know. I mean, who knows, to be completely honest. I could make arguments against it. I can see why somebody would want to do it. We see governments disconnect their countries themselves whenever there's social unrest. I remember there was a talk at DEF CON a few years ago talking about how to get your message out when the government tries to shut you up or something.
Mm-hmm.
And even during like the Arab Spring, they were, I think like in Libya, they had cut off the internet, and they started bouncing satellite signals and using ham and stuff to basically go around and they had the backbone cut, so it wasn't like, oh, they disabled the DNS, which we've seen them do, but it was more a case of like, they straight disconnected the backbone that connected their country to the internet, so you couldn't get anything out. And they disconnected the mobile networks and everything. So what people were basically doing was bouncing off, low orbit communication satellites and communicating into people that had active internet connections elsewhere in the world. And then those people were taking that data and translating it back in. It was a super slow connection, but it worked, and it allowed people to get messages out. I think they even set up a special Twitter account for it, just so, the people that were being shot in the streets by their I don't know if we call them tyrants or what, but the people that were trying to shut them up were doing so by force. And I think if they try to do something like that, there will probably be some kind of answer from the populace worldwide. And I'll say that there are projects that are also geared towards that. I think I gave a talk.
You did, actually.
4 years ago about maybe longer, about the interplanetary file system, and there's CJDNS or CDJNS. I can't remember. I can never remember that. There's a system called, I think, Dysphoria or something along those lines. And they're all working towards a decentralized system to where everything's going to be encrypted, and you're essentially relying on your peers across the internet. And, they're even going so far as mesh networking and such. So we'll see.
Yeah, somebody had just mentioned that with all this SpaceX, LEO, microsatellites, there might be a even more connectivity. But it's interesting to know that they are planning for it.
Well,
they have a plan for it. They do.
Yeah. The opinions I express are my own. They are not of my employer or anything like that. I will say that there are powers that be on the internet that are already trying to do that kind of stuff. We've seen other powers attempt to do it in times of unrest. And, as a staunch libertarian, I wouldn't put it past them. But I would also, it's a case of like, fuck around and find out. What you're going to do is you're going to drive technologies. The system was designed to be resilient against this. So as you push towards this, the system, I think, will attempt to defeat this as well. So I think you will see these decentralized connectivity efforts, and like you're talking about, it's fine when you can cut off somebody's little backbone, but if you have a cluster of satellites like they're talking about with the SpaceX stuff, how do you defend against that? Do you jam the satellites? I don't know how you defend against that. I don't know if you can jam a satellite. I'm assuming you can.
Oh, these are microsatellites, so there's a lot of them. I mean, they're supposed to saturate the low orbit, right?
That's your flying IoTs right there. That's your space.
I wonder how big are these microsatellites? Are these like suburban sized satellites? How big are these microsatellites?
I had no idea. This is something we're gonna have to have somebody come and give us a presentation, because it said that this is something new that we don't know about it. I truly thought when we play at the what's his name, the Hack the Satellite thing, that we were actually got an antenna. We never actually got to play with a real satellite, but that's something that is something that I'm looking at, and probably find somebody that can come and give us an explanation, because it's definitely something we need to take a look at.
Well, I think it's also, like if you start jamming a satellites, what does that mean to other governments? If if it's a distributed network, I mean, we're already seeing like in terrestrial networks where one government does something and the whole world gets mad at them. If you were to do something like that at a satellite scale, there would definitely be collateral damage, right? So if you're going to be blocking or jamming satellite communications to shut down this form of communication you don't like, and it starts to bleed over into a sovereign nation next to you, is that calls for a war? You potentially censored a significant portion of their populace as well. Do they have a right to defend themselves? I don't know. It answers a bunch of weird questions, or asks a bunch of weird questions that I don't really have answers for.
All because of a crock pot.
Yeah, right. This is why we can't have nice things.
This was amazing. Good. Thank you very much. Let's see if they have any other last questions. This was pretty amazing. If you jam one, another will be along in a minute. Yeah, we gotta Phil was saying that this was an amazing session. I agree. This was incredible. And we need to follow up on that Starlink. I didn't know it's called Starlink. So maybe you guys will come back and at one point tell us about satellite IoTs, because everything that's connected is pretty much getting hacked.
Well, we always found when we were doing even the research into like the Mirai and other stuff, when we started scanning, a lot of it was like not shortwave, but like cellular repeaters and like wireless communication device, like industrial enterprise level stuff, which was concerning as well, because if some skid from wherever is able to get in and run their Bitcoin miner on this cellular thing, then in a wartime scenario, what does that mean for somebody? Is somebody going to be able to come down and shut down cellular networks on accident or on purpose?
Right.
And it's terrifying. Keeps me awake at night. I don't even like to think about it.
It is terrifying. Well, thank you very much, guys. Any last words? Thanks again. This was a pretty amazing.
Yeah. I'm all good.
Okay.
I hope you guys did enjoy the talk. I hope you guys enjoy the slides. Set up LiSa on your nice disposable Linode environment, and you guys are all awesome. Remember, join the
Discord,
the Slack. We have the communication bots. I hope you guys are enjoying it. I know I was supposed to give a little talk or like a rundown on how to use Discord. I kind of got that disconnected on that time. I was in the middle of moving into a new house and stuff, and have to rip out some pink carpet behind me. But I really hope that this talk, you guys really enjoyed it.
All right. Well, thank you very much, chat, and Respeto. I knew this was going to be an awesome talk, and it was. So hopefully we'll have you guys sometime in the future and give us an update on what's going on. So thank you, and everybody, please join our Discord. Stay tuned in our meetup group, and we'll be posting soon information about our next meeting. Thank you very much, and we'll see you soon.
See you guys later.
Always fun. See you guys.
Miss you guys.
You too, buddy.